In this video we're going to be looking at how we use the discriminant. Now I've written down what the discriminant is here. It's b squared minus 4ac. You might recognise it from the inside of the square root in the quadratic formula. And the idea is that just using this could tell us some information about the graph without having to use the whole quadratic formula. And that's because of the nature of that square root and the plus and minus in front of it. So we know that there are going to be two solutions to a quadratic, which means that it'll either, if it's a positive quadratic, look something like this, or if it's a negative quadratic, look something like that. And the key point is that it's crossing at two different points, and that will happen when the discriminant is greater than 0. So I've just written that down. When the discriminant is greater than 0, we're going to get two solutions. So that's when b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0. There are going to be repeated solutions, or one solution in a certain scenario, and that's where when the graph looks something like this. If it's a positive, it just touches, and same with a negative, it just touches the x-axis at one point. So those are the one solutions, and that's when the discriminant is equal to 0. And then there are also times when there are no solutions, and that's when, if you had a positive quadratic, it wouldn't touch, wouldn't cross the x-axis, and same with if you had a negative one, it would all be below the x-axis, so there'd be no solutions. And that's when the discriminant is less than 0. So the reason why this works is because with the quadratic formula we have a number plus or minus the discriminant, the square root of the discriminant over another number, and if it's more than 0, we're going to get an answer out of this square root, and then we're going to add it to this number or subtract it from this number, so we'll have two distinct numbers. So that means we'll have two distinct points. If it's equal to 0, then if we're adding or subtracting 0 from a number, that number is not changing whether we add or whether we subtract. So that number will be the same. So we'll have a repeated solution, which means it will be the same point, which means we'll only have one solution. And then finally, when it's less than 0, when this is less than 0, we get a math error. We get an imaginary number which we can't use, and so the quadratic formula breaks down because there are no solutions. Now, something that's really useful about the discriminant is when we are looking at sketching graphs. So if we have a look at some of these, so I want to sketch these graphs just using the discriminant, and the idea is that if we substitute in these numbers into the discriminant, which is b squared minus 4ac, we'll know if we have two solutions, one solution, or no solutions. The other bits of information is it positive or negative? One more thing that we can work out to help us sketch is the y-intercept, so I'll add that in and we'll use those in our graphs. So if we start with the first, we've got b squared, which is 4, minus 4 times 1, which is 4, times c, which is 2, so it's 4 minus 8. So what we get is a graph with no solutions. It's a positive quadratic, so that means that it's going to have a smiley face, and also we can work out the y-intercept by substituting x is 0 into this formula. So if x is 0, then That doesn't exist, and neither does that. So the y-intercept is 2. So we can sketch that then. So we know that it's a positive quadratic with a y-intercept of 2. Now I've sketched it there. It could have been there, and it's quite difficult to know which way round it is. In a later video I'll be showing how to decide whether or where exactly the quadratic fits, but for now, just sketching it, we know it's got no solutions and the y-intercept is at 2. Let's look at the next one. We've got x squared minus 4x plus 4. So if we substitute into the discriminant, we'll have minus 4 squared, which is 16, and then minus 4 times a, which is 4 times 4, so we'll have 16 minus 16, which equals 0. So that means we're going to have just one solution, and we can also work out the y-intercept, which is going to be positive 4, and also it's a positive quadratic, so again it's going to be a smiley face. So here we're going to have a graph that looks something like that. So it crosses there at 4, and it's got one solution. We can actually work out what this point is here by completing the quadratic formula. So we'll have minus b, which is going to be 4 plus or minus square root of 0 all over 2a, which is 2, so 4 over 2, so that point there is 2. Let's move on to the third one. There's 3 more to go. So again, we've got a positive, so it's going to be a happy face quadratic. And if we substitute into the discriminant, we've got b squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, so 4 times 3, so minus 4 times 3 is plus 12. So it's a positive quadratic, so it's got it's a positive discriminant, so 2 solutions. The y-intercept is going to be minus 3. And I'm also going to work out the 2 roots. So we've got minus b, so that'll be minus 2 plus or minus the square root of 16, which is 4, all over 2a, which is 2. So that'll work out to be minus 1 plus or minus 2. So what we'll have is x equals minus 3 or x equals 1. And so let's sketch it in. Y-intercept is minus 3 because I've substituted in those. So crosses there. One of the points is there, the other one's there, so it looks like it's going to be a graph like this. It's a positive one. And the other way of checking which side of the graph it's on is that this number here, once we've worked this out, this number, this minus 1, is the central turning point of the quadratic, whether it's positive or negative, so it turns here at minus 1. So we knew the centre was on this side of the y-axis, wasn't going to be on this side like this. Looking at the penultimate example that we're going to do, let's work out the discriminant again. So b squared is 4, and then we've got minus 4 times minus 4, which is 16, and then times minus 1 is going to be minus 16. So here we're going to have no solutions again, and we need to look at what the y-intercept is going to be, and if it's negative, well, it's negative, so it's going to be an unhappy quadratic like that, and the y-intercept is minus 4, because if we substitute 0 into both of these terms, we'll be left with minus 4. So our graph is going to look something like this. So point there is -4. And then finally the last one, again let's find the discriminant. So b squared is 4, and then we've got -4 times -1, which is 4 times 3 is 12, so it's plus 12. And our y-intercept is at +3, so we know that it crosses at 3. It's going to have two solutions, and it's going to be a negative quadratic. I just want to find where the centre of the graph is. So if we put it all into the quadratic formula, so we've got minus b plus or minus this all over 2a. Minus b over 2a is going to be the centre of the graph. So we've got -2 over 2 times -1, which is -2. So this minus b would be 1, and then we would have plus or minus square root of 16 over -2, but we don't need to worry about that because this is where the symmetry is around, that's where the centre of the graph is. So we know that it crosses, or sorry, the centre is at 1. We can find the crossing points, so that's going to be 16, with root 16, which is 4 over 2, which is 2. So 1 plus or minus 2, so it'll be at 3 and -1. And the centre point is at 1, and if it's negative, it's going to take this shape here.